Um, as you can see, the title of this is Foundations. I know it's new; you never heard that, but no, this is kind of. And the Lord really laid this on our hearts, even really before Brother Carr even said anything. And something that I mentioned in a previous lesson has really hung with me. That to me is a key factor and a key point that I always knew, but once I understood it, can I truly say I understood? And it helped me with my walk with God. Um, Vertical and horizontal alignment with God. It's a lot of mouthful, but once you understand it, God can change you and God can bless you. Vertical alignment with God is to be right with God, but not only be right with Him, we must also know who He is. To be vertically aligned with God allows us to push through things that hold us back. And it clears the way for us to accomplish His will. Acts 9:5 says, He said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It is hard to kick against the pricks. In Acts 9:5, Paul says, Who are you? He's asking in complete trust. You see, Saul is blind. He doesn't know what the future holds, but he asked in blind faith, trusting God, said, Who are you? Being a father, one of the stories that never gets old I can identify, completely blind trust, the story of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham is a prime example of a man who shows the willingness to listen, to obey with God in blind faith. Genesis 22:1, and it came to pass when these things, and God did tempt Abraham, and He said unto Abraham, He said, Behold, here am I. And He said, Take thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham said to his young men, Abide here, and he asked. And he lad, and go yonder, and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and laid it to Isaac his son, and took the fire in the hand, the knife. They went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. He said, Here am I. My son, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide Himself a lamb for burnt offering. So they together went together. I'd like to make a side note. Isaac never questioned Abraham's father. He never argued with him. He never fussed. He never complained. You see, he saw God in his dad. He knew that there was a relationship, and he knew there was understanding. He knew that Isaac said, I trust my father, and I've seen what God has done in him. He has that relationship with him. Yeah. Through this story was trust, and God took over the situation. Verse 13, and Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, him a ram caught in the thicket by the thorns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered him a burnt offering instead of the son. Having complete trust in God, nothing in the way between you and Him. It's knowing. So you have to understand that Abraham had always prayed for a son. Abraham had always asked him. This was his promise. And when God asked him to trust Him, He didn't argue. He didn't ask for a second opinion. He didn't ask that, hey, what do you think? Oh, I disagree with it, or my opinion is. He said, okay, God. And what that simply says is he is aligned with God. He trusts God with 100%. I could not imagine. I always try to put myself in these Bible character stories and how their situations, and taken any of my children and they say, this is who I want. Jesus said, verily I say unto you, whosoever shall receive the kingdom as of a little child shall no wise enter in. He had that trust. He understood that says, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to trust God. You have to understand, as growing out in the country and being around rams and goats and different things, rams don't go the same way every time. They meander, they go and do. As a kid, we had goats. You never knew where they were going to be. We had 8 acres. They may be one corner one day and this corner another day. But you see, under Abraham, he trusted Isaac, trusted God with his son Isaac, and knew that when he come up the mountain, he told his servants, he says, I and the lad will come again. Do I think he knew the future? Do I think he knew, yeah, God's got a ram up there. He's there every day, 11:30. Yeah, we got to hurry. We're going to be there 11:30. He had no clue. But he trusted God. I could not imagine going up with your son and saying, Dad, I see everything, but I don't see the offering. And he says, son, God will provide his own offering. God will provide for himself. But we see when you understand, when you get these things right, God is making deals behind you and taking care of things that you didn't even ask for. God is taking care of problems you didn't even know come. So that's what happens when he coming up the mountain. This ram, God is on its way. Your answer is on the way, and you don't even know it yet. But see, he trusted in God, and he said, God, I give this to you. That answer, and that's just simply, and that's saying, Abraham, I could almost put myself in that night before he went up the side of the mountain. I could almost put myself in his shoes and wondering with a tear in his eye, the first steps, the first time he said that, the first time he reached out to hold him and he said, tomorrow morning, me and you are going up the side of a mountain. I think he had no clue what was going to happen, but he trusted God. And that's those key elements that I think, those foundation moments, if you understand that no matter what you do, no matter where you go, no matter what comes your way, you say, God, I don't understand. God, I don't see the answer. I don't see the ram on the backside of the mountain, but God, I trust you with this. And I know that that's coming. Moving on, but he thinks I am close. I'm sorry, let's go back. But what does it mean to be as a child? I have 4 kids. They all believe in me. They know that I've watched Judah. I was this week with all the freeze coming. I was working all around the house, and half the time Judah could see me, half the time he couldn't. And he lost me, and all of a sudden he's nervous. And I was like, "Well, what?" I couldn't find you. But when he knew I was close, when he knew he could see me, when he knows I was close, he's fearless. He's hanging off the fence. He's hollering to neighbors. He's waving to dogs because he knows Dad is close. Right. He know that. But I watched him when he couldn't see me. He's a big chicken. He couldn't see. He thought he was alone, and he's all nervous. And Dad, I couldn't see you. I didn't know where you were because there's a closeness there. And that's that same relationship with God. We love God as a child. You have that blind faith. You know He's there. Be fearless. You know He's got you. He's not going to let you fall. A relationship with God is not having the power to know the future, but knowing Him and trusting Him at all as well. So we talked about vertical alignment. What is horizontal alignment? Horizontal alignment is a product of vertical alignment, being aligned vertically with God. Gives us power. Job 13:15 says, though he slay me, yet will I trust him, but I will maintain my own ways before him. Job is an excellent example of horizontal alignment. Even though Job lost everything, his children, his livelihood, his reputation, his health, he knew God. Better yet, he knew that his relationship with God through his whole world had fallen apart. He knew through his vertical alignment that his situation was not his end. He understood that God had the power to fix it all. Job 1:21 says, naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. And the Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. But I love how he ends it. He says, blessed be the name of the Lord. Job knew, he said, if I didn't take my eyes off God, that this trial would not defeat him. Think about it, because if he ultimately, the overcomer, will speak life 1,000 years later. You think about if he would questioned God, if he'd think about it, if he would said, no, you're wrong, I'm going to die with my family, I'm going to go away, I'm going to give up. Will we ever know his name? Will we ever speak about this story? Would you ever hear it over the pulpit? I venture to say no. You allowed God to use you, you will always feel the need to grow, to change, to mature, to be a part of a revival. One of my prayers being says, God, don't let me miss the revival. Don't let it pass me by. But not just today, but I want the Connect class not to pass y'all by. Not to let it miss y'all. Because honestly, when I see the Connect class and I see y'all, I see so much potential. I see so much greatness. I see so much key to revival. I see so many that are just right here. That one thing, as preaching Brother Carr, 2-degree change, one move here, one move there. And God can do anything. And I'll say it this weekend, once you try that, once you allow yourself to say, God, nothing else matters. I'm not going to promise you it's a bed of roses. I'm not going to promise you it's easy, because the world wants you to stay right here. The Lord wants you to stay right under your potential, right under your greatness, under what God really has planned for you. Are they going to fight you? Is the thing's going to come against you? Absolutely. Nothing's perfect. Right. Walking with God is not always easy, but living for God. And once you understand, say, God, nothing else matters. We had a man in our home this week, as Assembly of God, and he looked me in the eye and he said, if you don't do anything, Jason, don't ever stop going to church. Don't ever stop going to church, Jason. He says, I went to church, I had my kids, and I backed away, and I slowly backed away, and I watched my kids fade away, and none of my kids ever do this, and none of my kids ever do this. And I'm thinking, me and my wife are like, what is going on? This man is pouring his life out, and he's telling his marriage and everything fall apart. He said, but the key was I stopped going to church. I gave up. I slowed down. And I think, and I was wondering if, in my mind, I'm talking to this man, and if he would have just understood that business doesn't matter, problems don't matter, bills don't matter. But if he understood it, where would his family be today if he understood that all that matters is God, that all that matters is living my life with God, with family, that bringing my kids to church, to show them how to be saved and what to know and how to have a relationship with God? Where would he be today? And he just, almost tears in his eyes. He said, Jason, they don't even come to church. They don't even talk about it anymore. But I raised them and I took them to private school. I gave everything I had to them, and I have nothing to show for it. My wife's going to take over from here. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, because last time I taught, I couldn't. I was telling Kayla this morning I wasn't able to post it because I forgot the mic. And when I turned it on, when I went back to listen to the recording, you could hear nothing. And I turned it on, and it was like, I thought, well, I can't put that on there. It's too abrupt, and people will be like, so how did she intro it? The thing about vertical alignment that stands out to me is, like you said, vertical alignment is a product of horizontal alignment. No, horizontal alignment is a product of vertical alignment. And to me, horizontal alignment is things are going according to plan. Finances, kids, all of these facets of life that web out from us are aligned. They're all working smoothly, and not perfectly, but they're all working in tandem. And that comes from that horizontal, yes. That vertical alignment. I do know the concept of horizontal and vertical, but with that said, some of what I'm going to say today is probably going to seem redundant because Pastor taught on this last Sunday night. Honest to goodness, I had this prepared before I even knew what he was going to teach. And then I taught something very similar at co-op. So Jennifer and Jonathan, I apologize. You're going to hear a repeat in some instances, but we, Jason and I had been, and even Kayla and Jake back last year, we had been planning a series that we were going to start this year. And it was in the works, and then we kind of added some things to it. And then Pastor, and really just in passing a meeting about co-op, said, my plan for this year is to talk about foundations. And I thought, well, praise the Lord, this goes perfectly with what he's talking about. And as I started thinking about foundations, I wanted to know, I looked up, what is the oldest building that's functioning? Because, we have a lot of old structures that are still in existence, but and some that aren't even maybe inhabitable. I think of like Stonehenge, but monuments and things that we are not even sure how old they are. But I wanted to know, like, what building is still standing, people are still coming and going, and what is the oldest? And the oldest building that's still functional today is the Pantheon. It's over 2,000 years old, and it's still used today. People still go in there. And the number one question that I had was, what causes a building that old to still be standing and withstand the test of time, because I've often looked around, where I live, where I travel, and I've thought there's not, and I've heard other people say this too, there's not that quality of that workmanship, the craftsmanship that there used to be. That, hurricane, earthquake comes. I don't know that a lot of the buildings in our area could withstand that, could withstand 2,000 years of abuse, and so, um, well, I'm going to get ahead of myself. So I'm going to slow down. In Ezra 3, the Jews that had been captive in Babylon were returning to Jerusalem, and they were getting ready to rebuild the temple. And verse 2 says, Then Jeshua the son of Jozadak and his brethren the priests, and Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and his brethren, arose and built the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings on it, as it is written in the law of Moses the man of God. So it had to start with building an altar. Verse 6 says, From the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, although the foundation of the temple of the Lord had not yet been laid. So if this year our plan is to rebuild foundations in our life, it's going to have to start with an altar. Sure. It's got to start with laying our will on the altar. When foundations were laid in biblical times, builders would start by digging down to bedrock. And the Bible even refers to this. Pastor talked some about building on sand, building on an unsure foundation. And he talked about there were homes in the area, mansions, multi-million-dollar homes, that the foundations began to settle. And these homes were literally like sliding down the hill. So these Pantheon buildings like this, they would dig way down and they would find bedrock. They would also dig out things that would maybe keep them from getting to the bedrock. And just like that, we have to dig out things that are going to make us unstable. We've got to dig out bad habits. We've got to dig out distractions. We've got to dig out hindrances. And fasting is one of the ways that we reveal those things that we need to dig out. So we've got to have an altar and we've got to have fasting. They would use materials like limestone and marble. Foundations were built from materials that were nearly indestructible. And similarly, we have to build our life on something solid. And nowadays, there's not a lot that's solid, that's indestructible. 1 Corinthians 3:9-15 reads, For we are God's fellow workers, you are God's field, you are God's building. According to the grace of God which was given to me, as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another builds on it. But let each one take heed how he builds on it. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. The foundation we lay is going to show up in our life. Because here's the thing. Dave Ramsey says things like blowouts, flat tires, busted pipes, they're not really surprises. It is guaranteed that things are going to go wrong in life. We're going to suffer loss. We're going to suffer job losses. We're going to suffer disappointments and setbacks. So when that comes, those setbacks, the fire is going to reveal what kind of foundation is laid. We have to have a relationship with God. And I feel like it seems like we've drilled this, like we're just constantly talking about prayer, fasting, Bible reading. And I can see where some might feel like, can we talk about anything else? Like, come on, give us something new. But the thing is, just like the foundation of the Pantheon has allowed it to withstand 2,000 years of tests, the only thing that's going to allow us to stand that kind of test is a true, solid relationship with God. So fasting, laying our will on the altar. Prayer, developing a dialogue with God. The Bible says that Adam that God talked with Adam in the cool of the day. And I heard someone recently say, we come to God. Sometimes we get into, because again, we've drilled this, it needs to be a part of your routine. It needs to be something we do every day, prayer, every day, every day. And it can sometimes become routine in how we do it. And before long, we're coming with this like list of, okay, God, today I need help with my job, and I need you to help me with my kids, and I need help with this. And we start to treat him like an ATM. Like, okay, I'm here and I'm putting my card in, and here's my list of things that I need. But relationship was established in the garden. It was established in the cool of the day, and it was, hey, how'd your day go? What's on your mind? What's on your heart? And it was a back and forth. It wasn't just Adam spilling his guts to God and peace out. It's about a relationship. So it has to be a dialogue with God. Fasting, prayer, reading the word. Our relationship with God is the most important thing. But we can't depend on others to tell us what's in the word. Repetitive reading, the reason Pastor constantly reminds us that we should read our whole Bible, and I know we've talked about the pros and the cons of that. If you don't read it in a year, then plan to read it in 2 or 3, but eventually you've got to cover all of the material in the Bible, because it is up to you to know what's in the word. And repetitive reading, when you read it again and again, it opens our understanding. And then church attendance. I'll be honest, I know on an instinctual level that it's very important to be faithful to attending church and attending church functions. But when I've gone to the Word, I haven't always found just like a ton of scripture support. And as I prayed and asked the Lord, like, give me wisdom, give me a way to help convey how important that is, one of the things that He reminded me was, even the most accomplished individual, someone who has the highest level of education that we can think of, let's say a brain surgeon, or a rocket scientist, like that's being funny, but people that we think of that in society we think that person has attained the highest level of intelligence, they still need continuing education. They still, even once they've attained that status, they have to continue to learn from others. And so that same way, we need to attend church, because iron sharpeneth iron. We learn from each other, we encourage each other, we build each other up. And God did not create us to be an island. We have to have connection. So in ancient times, they didn't have modern technology, they didn't have equipment, but they found ways to use ramps and pulleys to move heavy stone blocks. They created human and animal operated cranes. They had simple tools like chisels and hammers that would shape and carve the stone to create a puzzle like fit. And I think it's interesting that if you go to some of these buildings, they didn't have fasteners. They didn't necessarily have like screws and nails in the way that we think today. There were some rudimentary forms of those things, but in general, there wasn't the kind of fasteners that we have today. And yet the fit of those stones is so tight that no water or wind, you can't even slip a piece of paper through it. And so skill and creativity created masterpieces like the Colosseum, the Church of the Nativity, the Hercules Tower. These are all buildings of similar age and origin. And like builders of old, we don't need special skills or technology to build a godly foundation, but we have to have a desire and a determination to know God, not just to be acquainted with Him, but to know Him. And one of the things that we've talked about in this class before, and I can't remember who presented it, but SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. And so and I just use the example of, if I'm going to be specific, this year I need to pray, fast, read my Bible, and attend church. Like, those are 4 specific goals that I want to do this year. And so if they were going to be measurable, I might start, and I want to preface this by saying, if you're already someone who's praying an hour or more a day, if you're already reading 5 chapters of the Bible today, I'm not suggesting you back off from that. So I'm saying, if you're not doing anything on a daily, consistent basis, then we're talking about that 2-degree change that pastors referred to, that I'm not going to set an unattainable goal. And so I might start with, I'm going to fast 1 meal a week. I might start with, I'm going to pray 5 minutes every day. I'm going to read 1 chapter of my Bible every day. I'll attend a minimum of 8 services or church activities per month. Again, these are minimums, But if you're not doing anything consistently, you need to start with a 2-degree change, but they're measurable. There's something that I can identify. Yes, I did complete it. No, I did not. They're also achievable, 2-degree change. They don't take an extreme amount of effort. They're manageable for me as an individual. And then they need to be relevant. Well, I can assure you these goals are going to have a direct and almost instant impact on your life and on your walk with God. And then they need to be time bound. And so for the year of 2024, our brains are wired to respond to rewards, and celebrating the completion of small accomplishments leads to the completion of larger goals. There was a study by Harvard Business School, and they found that people who tracked very small achievements enhanced their motivation and they got more done in larger areas. But the practice of recording your progress helps you appreciate small wins, which boosts your confidence. Any accomplishment, no matter how small, releases the neurotransmitter dopamine, which boosts your mood, your motivation, and your attention, so it helps you focus. It also signals you to keep doing that activity because it's rewarding. The human body is very driven by reward. And so this is very basic. I even have to say something like, is this too juvenile to pass out? And I'm not saying you have to do this, but maybe if you don't like this, find another way. But a habit tracker, just 30 days. I'm going to hear them and be specific with yourself. These are the things. Now, I wrote at the top what I said in my lesson. You can obviously change it, or like I said, go find one of your own. But the idea is to track that every day. And I'm going to suggest, and I'm going to preface it by saying, sometimes these GroupMe groups can get tedious if there's just tons of information that gets put in there. And I'll be honest with you, I have good intentions and I'll want to read everything. And then if I get behind, it's like scrolling and I'm like, I can't stop and catch up. So I'm not asking for anyone to go in there and like detail out everything that you're doing. But I would say maybe just as an encouragement to each other, when we've met those daily goals, and I will say the last 3 in those columns, you're not going to check those off every day. So there's a blank for the dates, day 1 through 31. And the first 2 columns, yes, we want to be checking those every day. The others, we're checking on the days that we're actually doing it. But again, it's just reinforcing that idea of, hey, you get a reward. You did this. So I would say if you want to, go in the GroupMe and connect GroupMe and just post a check mark. That's just saying, hey, I'm keeping up with my daily. And I think seeing others do it will help encourage, and it's not that way. We're not trying to get into specifics because again, you want it to be a reinforcement. And if we get in there and we say, hey, I read 20 chapters of the Bible this week, that might discourage your brother if he's barely making 1 chapter a day. And so it's just put a little check mark that says, hey, I'm here, we're connected. The next thing we're going to do, and got enough time, praise the Lord, we were trying to cram a lot in today, is a survey. And before we pass it out, or as he's passing it out, I want to make it very, very clear. This is number 1, it's anonymous. So I'm not asking you to put your names. In fact, please don't put your name on it. And it's not an assessment. But what we wanted to do, sometimes I had notes about this and I apparently did not print them. They're on this. He took my notes, y'all. I wanted to make sure I was telling you everything I was thinking about. It's not a spiritual assessment. It's not about judgment. It's about being authentic and being honest. Because when we get real with ourselves and we get real with God, we open ourselves up through authenticity to be available for what God wants to do. And so we have to be vulnerable and ask questions, or sometimes if we don't do those things, we're going to miss getting answers or getting help we need. So part of setting new foundations is digging down and dealing with stuff that's beneath the surface that might keep us from stability. And so this survey is about finding out if there are trends or if there's information or gaps that we're missing. Because maybe the great majority of the class is missing a key lesson that some of us take for granted. Has anyone ever had a skill that you thought everybody could do, and then as you get older you realize, oh, not everybody can do that? I told him, I said, I'm going to give a funny example and I'm going to need your permission for this. I grew up having a natural knack for directions, for knowing where things are. I could go somewhere. The joke with this is true story. One time I went somewhere as like a middle schooler, and we were now married. And so somebody said, hey, come pick this up at my house. Do you know where I live? Oh, yeah, I know. And we head there, and it's not like right off a main street. It was kind of like back in this neighborhood. And as we get back in the neighborhood, I said, oh, rats, I hope he still lives there. Jason said, well, when was the last time you went? And I said, I think I was in middle school. And he's like, you know how to get there? And so I took it for granted that everyone could just do that. And so we get married and we set off on our honeymoon. And I drove for the first little, or no, he drove for the first little while. And I read the atlas because this was before MapQuest. And I kept us on track. And so when it was my turn to drive, I gave him the atlas. And 8 hours later, we were way away from the goal. And I was very angry. Very angry. So I learned real quickly that we don't all get the same gifts. And so this assessment is about, and we're asking everybody to turn them in if you don't mind. It's not about, or it's not an assessment. The survey is about us finding out, are there trends? Yes, sir. Are there trends or things that maybe we need to focus on as we start our next series? And I'm going to turn the video off and give y'all time to work on that.